Now that we have participated the 2-day ICAN Forum, could you kindly summarize what we have achieved? As a founding member of the ICAN, that it would be greatly appreciated that if you could share with them what you have seen last 2 days and the message that civil society is now trying to convey to the participants of the first meeting of the State Party of TPNW. Thank you.
When we all came together in Vienna at the Nuclear Ban Forum of Civil Society, we started, as I think is so important, listening to the hibakusha from Hiroshima and Nagasaki, but also from various places where nuclear testing has been used, from the Pacific to Kazakhstan to the United States, from the Nevada test site, the downwinders there, and then also the hibakusha that are happening now from places like the Congo, where there's both the uranium and then there are these new colonialist industrial military activities to do with new technologies in weapons. So it was a real connectivity going on of what military industrial nuclear militarism, in a way, threats, what harm they cause to us as people, as human beings. And just as we also heard today at the Humanitarian Impacts of Nuclear Weapons Conference, disproportionate impacts on women and girls because of our biology, and from a third generation hibakusha from Japan, whose grandmother was contaminated by those horrendous bombings. But we moved in the weekend from the horror of what happened that reminds us that it is an imperative to stigmatize and ban and eliminate nuclear weapons. And because we now have the Nuclear Ban Treaty, it's an imperative to implement the TPNW. We moved, therefore, to hear from young people, lots of young people who are just really energized and engaged in both stopping the existential threat of extinction from both climate destruction, which we have to understand the military-industrial contribution through fossil fuels and industrialization to climate destruction is absolutely connected in with nuclear destruction. And these things interconnect, and nuclear winter and climate heating, these are more burden, and they cause extreme weather around the world that destroys the most vulnerable people, that cause famine. And all this is taking place in the backdrop of threats of nuclear weapons being explicitly used by Russia against Ukraine within days of the Russian invasion of Ukraine. And we also talked about recognizing that the 9 nuclear-armed states and some of their allies, and we have to include Japan as a problem here, also have believed that having nuclear weapons or access to nuclear weapons through alliances gives not just this thing called deterrence, which is a theory that has now been completely disproved, because Vladimir Putin was not deterred from invading Ukraine by the fact that the US, UK and France are NATO members with nuclear weapons in Europe. That deterrence did not work. But actually, Vladimir Putin felt that he had an ability to deter NATO, but we have to show that this is not the way to have security in the world. But more than that, he did what Tony Blair did, and Tony Blair mentioned in his memoir, which is because Russia is a nuclear-possessing country, a nuclear-armed leader, like Putin and like Tony Blair back in 2003, could believe that having nuclear weapons gave him freedom of action to go to war on an invasionary capacity against a country that does not have nuclear weapons, and believe that there would be no real legal repercussions. So all of these issues we were discussing in many different kinds of ways, with young and old and men and women and diverse, and we talked about the connections, how each of us in our different countries and from different faiths and different political systems came together to say, we have banned nuclear weapons, but many of our countries have not signed this important treaty. We have to implement. How do we do that? For me, having been very long time since I was at Greenham Common when I was a young woman in my 20s, trying to stop the nuclear-armed cruise missiles being deployed in Europe right back then, and getting the INF Treaty in 1987, and then dedicated my life first to getting the Comprehensive Test Ban Treaty. And collectively, governments and civil society, we achieved that. That's when I dreamed of that if we could ban nuclear weapons as a first step to getting a multilateral treaty that bans, that prohibits nuclear weapons, it doesn't have to have all the solutions. This is what the TPNW, the Nuclear Ban Treaty, it puts then in the principles of how to eliminate and verify the elimination of all the nuclear arsenals. This treaty, for me, is the culmination of my life's work. And to see so many young people gather together to take this forward all over the world lifted my heart. And now I want to say to you, whatever you believe, whatever faith you have, yes, do pray, but act as well. You know, whatever gods you believe in, and we know that there are many different ways of believing in the power of spirit, that requires also that we all act, that we act together, that we act collectively, but in different ways that are appropriate for us in our country, for us in our faith, for us as who we are as human beings, young or old, male or female. From wherever we come, we should bring our whole bodies and our minds and our spirits into not just banning nuclear weapons, because that is what the treaty does, but in implementing and making sure that our countries join, accede to, and implement this ban before it's too late. Because otherwise, by nuclear weapons or by climate destruction, our children are not facing the kind of future
I'll be right back.
that we want for them, a future of security, sustainability, and peace. So join me in giving that future to our children and their children, because that's what is needed now.